We can. All right, so we can get started here. It's 7:01, and yeah. So this is eight 8 weeks creating a culture of spiritual growth, and what I mean. I couldn't find it. I didn't know what word to use, but what I'm talking about culture here is kind of attitudes we may have, understandings of either applications or of certain doctrines, ways of interacting with one another, with interacting with Krishna, different kind of certain focuses we have in our culture, points of emphasis and then de-emphasis, the way we apply these things, various types of things that make up kind of the environment within which we practice uh, devotional service. And so I've been noticing various things for some time that I think, I don't think we understand this quite correctly, or I'm not understanding this quite correctly. I think maybe that this is not, I think, what was intended. And there came enough of them that it seemed to me it was worthwhile to bring them together. And because I thought there's enough of them that could actually affect our culture. And so that's one of the things I'm going to present to you and propose to you, that there are misunderstandings and misapplications and misinteractions that are causing us to slow our growth in bhakti. And I'm going to try. A lot of the things we discuss here, I don't think are discussed a whole lot, at least not in my experience. And so I really wanted to make sure that this was something justifiable, not just some kind of, interesting little thing to think about on the side, but actually had some relevance. And so I'm really going to try, and today I'm going to try to show you how that is, connect this with our core philosophy. And so we'll show that. Today it's going to be more or less an introduction. I'm going to show you kind of the basic overview of what we're going to discuss and what we're going to look at, and kind of give you the idea of why we're going this way. And so I'm going to, I guess one thing we can ask is this going to be relevant to me? All right. And so I'm going to give you this as an answer. And those of you who are here with the Shikshastakam will remember this. We're not going to cover it in the same way we did there. But there's this verse. It's the third verse of Lord Chaitanya Shikshastakam. And Tunadapi Sunichena Taroreva Sahishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtaniya Sadahari. One who thinks himself lower than the grass, who is more tolerant than a tree, and who does not expect personal honor, but is always prepared to give all respect to others, can very easily always chant the holy name of the Lord. And so this is according to Srila Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this verse represents the stage of steady devotional service, nishta. So there's various stages on the path, and this one is a very important one. Lord Chaitanya says, when he recites this verse, that somebody who has these qualities, and these qualities in the intensity which is described here, the qualities are here and are very intense. Right, that's the humility where they think of themselves lower than the grass. This is a substantial amount of humility. More tolerant than a tree is because he mentions, right, that the tree stands out in all kinds of weather. People even cut the trees down and they don't complain. So and they still give their fruit and shade. So there's a high level of tolerance. Bhaktivinoda Thakur adds forgiveness to this mix. And which is even more, and then a lack of pride, not wanting any respect, and have a really generous heart with others, wanting to give it. And so he says those who have that particular those set of qualities in that degree, he says, they've reached the stage of nishta, and they're prepared at that point to really smoothly go. The path becomes so much more smooth at that point. He says that really they're going to attain Krishna prema. And so the path becomes at the stage of steady bhakti. That means there's kind of steady remembrance of Krishna, steady engagement. And so things become so much less complicated than in the stage before, which is the unsteady stage. So if we look at that verse and we think, this is something I aspire to, rather than something that's a truth right now, then I think that this series of classes may relate to you. And again, and frankly, we are not alone if we look at that and feel that way. It's really understood that in ISKCON, there's persons who are more steady and less unsteady and more unsteady, but there's a whole lot of people that kind of get stuck right at this level, getting to the point where they not getting to this point where they can reach this particular verse. And I'm going to look a little bit here. I've got some slides from the Madhurya Kadambini, and it's a description. The book is a description of the different stages of bhakti. And so this is how Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, one of our great acharyas, describes it. And I have a little history with that. When I was a new devotee, moved into the temple in Detroit back in the 90s. I was a brahmachari living in the temple, and a couple of years in, I think this Madhurya Kadambini came out. And I was really feeling good. I was young, I had lots of strength, and so I was getting up every morning and doing the whole program every single time, and I was really enthusiastically doing service. I would take prasadam and run back to my service. I was really having it. I felt really good, and the Madhurya Kadambini came out and it described this, and so I was kind of, I was really hoping that I hadn't realized at that point that this Shikshastakam described steady devotional service. Otherwise, I would have known where I was immediately. but because I didn't see that it's not so graphic. Otherwise, I thought maybe I'm a little further along than I was. And then I ran into these 6 characteristics of unsteady devotional service, and I saw myself staring back, staring at the page, and I was staring back also. And so here, these are characteristics of unsteady bhakti, the stage before this, the one that we're trying to work our way through. That's really what we're trying to do, and I hope that the material here in this course can give us some assistance in that. And so it's utsaha mai. And so, and it's described this way: just as a pupil entering school may think he has already become a great scholar, worthy of everyone's praise, a person just beginning devotional service may display the audacity to think that he has mastered everything. Utsaha means enthusiasm, and utsaha mai means a person who possesses enthusiasm to excess. And so what happens, oftentimes, when you really take up the process kind of, seriously, you feel like there's some really big changes going on, and that's not really false. But you're thinking, hey, you kind of extrapolate, that, hey, if this is happening in this amount of time, I'm really moving down, I'm really moving along the path, things are really going to keep happening, and, in a few years, hey, who knows what will happen? And so there's like this really super type of enthusiasm that comes when you think your goal is close. Right? Like when people run a marathon or something, and at the end, if they're not completely wiped out, they have a little bit of enthusiasm at the end because it's almost over. And when there's a long ways to go, it's a little more difficult. And so this is what happens. You get a little bit too hyper enthusiasm, and that enthusiasm usually winds down when you start to when the reality begins to set in. Then the next characteristic is ganatarala, and he says a pupil may be diligently engaged in his studies, and yet at other times, because of inability to understand the subject matter and because of lack of real taste, becomes totally negligent. In the same way, a new devotee sometimes practices the different activities of devotional service attentively and sometimes neglects them. Being sometimes assiduous and at other times negligent, his sporadic endeavor is called ganatarala, thick or thin, or condensed and dilute. So sometimes the enthusiasm is pretty strong, and then sometimes it's a little bit less. And even if you may even still be doing the activities, but sometimes you're really feeling it more, and other times it's kind of, you're just doing it. And so and what's happening here, and we'll see pretty soon, that there's competing desires at this stage, and we'll see in a couple of stages down why it goes back and forth. And then there's this stage called Vyuda Vikalpa. And this one, there's a whole funny description here. When one speculates on all types of options in devotional service, it's called Vyuda Vikalpa, or extensive indecision or imagination. So he says sometimes the person thinks about whether they want to get married or not, what kind of service they want to do. Are they gonna try to be renounced now or renounced later, or all these different things, where they want to be. So there's a lot of this kind of stuff that's going on, and they're not settled in that way. And then this one, Vishaya Sangra, this ongoing battle with his previously acquired desires for sense pleasure, in which he is sometimes victorious and sometimes defeated, is called Vishaya Sangra, or war with sense pleasure. And so this is oftentimes what's behind the thick and thin. Right? So yes, we want Krishna, we want to serve Krishna, but there's this over here. It draws our attention. It says, hey, hello. And we say, okay, Krishna, just hang on a little bit. I got to take care of some business over here. Right? There's competing desires. So material things also are appealing, and sometimes so much so that they kind of take us away from Krishna. And then back and forth, there's a tug of war. He says this battle ongoing, sometimes victorious and sometimes defeated. Sometimes Krishna wins, sometimes the other things win. The other priorities take over. And so that's what's happening. At the stage of Nishta, the material things are still appealing, but your resolve is so strong that you say, no, I'm doing something more important. And then at further stages, you just go, what? I don't want that. But I don't want that. But in the stage of thick and thin, it's like, ooh, there's a push and pull going on. It's just how it works, right? And then there's a niyama akshama. The devotee may then resolve, from today I will chant such and such number of rounds of japa. I will pay so many obeisances, and I will render services to the devotees. I will not talk on any subject except the Lord, and I will give up all association with people who talk about material matters. Though he makes such resolutions every day, he is always unable to execute them. So it says this one is the inability to improve your service. And so you're trying, you're going to do more, you're going to do this, and then it doesn't work out. Maybe a little bit, and then it doesn't last. So so the one is a struggle with conflicting desires, and this one is the inability to sustain improvement in your service for all the same reasons. And the last one is called Tarangarangini, and it says it is well established that people become attracted to a person possessing bhakti. Due to bhakti's very nature, it's attractive. So bhakti produces much opportunity for material gain, worship, and position. These are weeds around the creeper of bhakti. Engaging oneself in pleasure-seeking ranga amidst these weed-like facilities, which are but small waves, taranga, in the ocean of bhakti. So this is like riding the little waves on top of bhakti instead of diving in. Is called tarangarangini, delighting in material opportunities. So people will like you, people will be impressed with you, people will be attracted to you, right? If you have some bhakti, and so you may then you'll get attention, and you like that, you're pleased at that. There's a certain, it's an egoistic pleasure, and so that may become a focus for you instead of Krishna. So that's an inhibiting factor. Okay. So those are the kind of things. So I saw myself in there and realized where I was, and then I had from that point on, I've been trying to figure out how to get to the next one, and so this is something a lot of folks are going through, and there was His Holiness Satyanandana Swami, when he came, it was early 2000s, he came to the US to have the first Japa retreat here in the US. And he gave it in California. It was to some of the leaders. And I heard the recordings of this, and he was saying how he had a situation, where he felt that he wasn't advancing, and it was kind of stagnant, and wasn't happy about it. And Srila Prabhupada, one of the reasons why Srila Prabhupada calls bhakti or devotional service a science is because it's understood how it works. So if it's not working, you should be able to go back and analyze what's wrong. And the science, if you're doing a chemical reaction, right? If you know how it works and the reaction is not coming correctly, you go back and say, well, something is wrong. You got the wrong, the wrong ingredients, the wrong amounts, the wrong temperature. So you can adjust it. So he was thinking that that he could go and figure out what it was that was wrong. And after some study and research into it, this is what he had faith in. He says, this verse here in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Eva Kevalam, Kalo Nasjeva, 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 Gatira Anyata. In this age of Kali, there is no other means for self-realization than chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name, chanting the holy name of Hari. So he was convinced that this is really the necessary and sufficient condition, chanting to make advancement. And he said, so he started to chant more rounds. And he was doing that for some time. And it didn't have any effect. And he said he was shocked and surprised, and he didn't know what to think, because he was certain that his conclusion was correct. The holy name was what was going to work. And it wasn't until sometime later that he understood what's here in the next or the second verse of the Shikshastakam. He said he heard something from Bhaktivinoda Thakur that clarified it, but here in this one, oh my Lord, oh Lord, oh Supreme Personality of God, this is Lord Chaitanya Shikshastakam. In your holy name there is all good fortune for the living entity, and therefore you have many names such as Krishna and Govinda, by which you expand yourself. You have invested all your potencies in those names, and there are no hard and fast rules for remembering them. My dear Lord, although you bestow such mercy upon the fallen conditioned souls by liberally teaching your holy names, I am so unfortunate that I commit offenses while chanting the holy name, and therefore I do not achieve attachment for chanting. So then from the Madhurya Kadambini, it's Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, no one should have doubt that the holy name has such inestimable power. But because the holy name is unhappy with offenses committed against it, it does not manifest its complete power in the offender. And so Prabhupada also talks about the three stages of chanting: the offensive stage, the clearing stage. So it's Namaparad, Namabas, and then the pure stage, Shuddhanam. And Prabhupada says, I think the quote that Satyanandana Swami ran across was where Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, if we're offensive, then chanting the holy name is not different from just chanting the alphabets. Prabhupada's a little bit more liberal on this. Again, he says that where there's smoke, there's fire. And he says, but if you try to cook your breakfast with smoke, it will take you 300 years. So there's always some potency in the name, but it just, if you're being very offensive, it won't be so much. It's more like cooking with smoke, is how Prabhupada put it. And then we try to reduce the offenses where there's less and less, and that's called a namabasa, and that it begins to have more effectiveness. And that's where we're looking to be. And then the pure name is where the high advanced bhakti takes place. So anyway, so he understood this, and so he's been working in all this time, trying to help people to chant and helping himself to chant and in the right way. So the offenses here, there's these are, there's the 10 offenses are given two places. There's one in at least two places. One is in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and I've taken most of the definitions from there because they're a little more concise than the one we usually, if we're in the temple, we recite. And the one we usually recite before chanting comes from the Nectar of Devotion, and there's a difference. Besides just the little bit of more succinct definitions, this number 6, no, where is it? This was number 5. To consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination doesn't appear in the teachings of Lord Chaitanya, and this number 11, to be inattentive while chanting, does. And so usually when we chant, we chant the ones that come from the Nectar of Devotion. At the end we say, which doesn't include inattention, we say, and it's also an offense to be inattentive while chanting. And it's a little unfair, because it turns out this last one is extremely pivotal in our chanting. And we say, and it's also, it's kind of like, it's like, doesn't seem to be very important. Like these are the ones. And so I've given it a number. It's now the 11th of the 10th offenses, just so we don't think it's an add-on, a throwaway, something to be neglected. And so they're to blaspheme a devotee of the Lord. This is Vaishnava aparad, and it's not just blasphemy. It's any kind of if you abuse them, if Prabhupada, there's a morning walk where Prabhupada was asked, I think it was Tamal Krishna asked him, because the voice is very distinctive. And he asked me, what's the difference between blaspheming, fault finding, and calling a spade a spade? And Prabhupada said that the blaspheme means to say something that's untruthful. To fault find is that the person has so many good qualities and you're focusing on the negative. And he didn't answer the third, so I guess that's in the absence of those two, you're calling a spade, you're seeing things as they are, right? But also if you mistreat them, certainly manipulate them, certainly, all these other kinds of things. So they're all these ones. What we're going to look at particularly, we're going to look at some of these more particularly in this series. But the blasphemy devotee of the Lord, to consider the Lord and the demigods on the same level, or think there are many gods, to neglect the orders of the spiritual master, to minimize the authority of the scriptures, the Vedas, to consider the glories of chanting Hare Krishna to be imagination, to interpret the holy names of God, to commit sins on the strength of chanting, to instruct the glories of the Lord's name to the unfaithful, to compare the chanting of the holy name to material piety, to remain attached to material things in spite of chanting the holy names, and to be inattentive while chanting. So those things cause the holy name to not manifest his full potency. So despite chanting, then advancement may not be happening. And then regarding that last one, the 11th one, this comes from the Harinam Chintamani. Haridas continued to speak, "O Lord, here in Puri you taught the importance of performing chanting the name without negligence. To Sanatan Goswami in South India, to Gopal Bhatta, you have counted inattention, pramada, as one of the aparads. If inattention is present in one's chanting of the name, one cannot attain nishta or steadiness, and without steadiness, one cannot attain prema. Therefore, inattention must be given up." So there he's putting a lot of emphasis on this. And then he says, later he says, pramada means inattention or carelessness. It is from this offense that all anarthas arise. So very, very pivotal one. And then he says again in the same chapter, even if one, this is the Harinam Chintamani, even if one successfully overcomes all the other offenses in chanting, and even if one chants the name continuously, prema may still not appear. The reason for this is that one commits the offense known as pramada or inattention. This offense will block the progress to prema. And then he breaks it down. There's 3 types. There's sleepiness, distraction, and then a lack of real enthusiasm. It says you're not sleepy, you're not distracted, but somehow you're just not into it. And this one's going to be the one that's most relevant for our course this time. It will be the enthusiasm part, the lack of enthusiasm. So now the question is, right, we started about talking about culture, and now we're talking about the holy name. Are they connected? Right? It seems like I went off the subject, right? You know, why don't we just chant the holy name then without offenses? If that's the key, why are we going to talk about our culture? Right? So I'm going to explain that. That's how I'm connecting this to our core philosophy. And so I'm going to present to you and try to show you how some of the various difficulties with our culture actually will push us towards these particular offenses, especially the blaspheming the devotees, how to not have, how to take away our enthusiasm. Some of these will take away our enthusiasm, and to a lesser degree, this one. And I'm thinking of the material things more in terms of like they said, the position and perquisites, and kind of, you know, the idea of being happy to get all this attention, that kind of stuff. So I think some of the stuff we discuss are going to actually, these misunderstandings and kind of imperfections in the culture actually cause us to be more likely to make offenses in our chanting. And so that's why I think it's relevant. And that's how it's connected to the core teaching. So I think I'm going to try to do that as we go along when we discuss these things. So this is what we're going to talk about. These are the kind of things we're going to talk about here in the next session. So this one, we're kind of introducing it. I'm giving you a little bit of a feel of what we're going to be talking about, and why I think it's relevant, you know, and to who it might be relevant to, and then we're going to have next time we're going to have bhakti is both internal and external, and we're going to look at the definition that Rupa Goswami gives of bhakti, and shows that there is sometimes we think of service as just the action, or we think if we just do the action, that's the service. And I don't think we consistently deal with the internal portion. And the definition of bhakti, a devotional service that Rupa Goswami gives us in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, he says there's anukulyena krish anushilanam. And so krish anushilanam are regular actions directed towards Krishna. And anukulyena is with a favorable attitude. Right? So our attitude in any kind of service is integral to the service. You can't separate them. Right? You can't, if you're not coming with some kind of an attitude of devotion, that's why it's Prabhupada says it's devotional service. It's not just service, it's devotional service. And so to me, this is a deep connection with what's enthusing us about devotional service. And so we're going to look at some of the things that affect that anukulyena, and just kind of discuss its importance a lot in that time. I think that's the part that Krishna finds really tasteful. And so we may do various things, and depending on our attitude, it may be more or less tasteful to Krishna. And so there's introspection and kind of thoughtfulness that's required. It's not service without it. It's not service without it. It's, you know, that's part of his definition. He doesn't just say Krishna Shilanam, actions directed towards Krishna. It's anukulyena Krishna Shilanam. And though and so I think we have a tendency, and sometimes because we don't, I'm going to argue that sometimes because we don't think much about that, about the internal part, you know, and then we'll because we, you know, that we tend to just kind of start doing service. We're not analyzing what's causing loss of enthusiasm, what might be inhibiting that anukulyena. So if it kind of slips away, we think, oh, let me just keep doing the service and it'll come back. or all the things necessary will be there, but it's an essential part. So that's what we're going to talk about a lot next time, and yeah, we'll see that, and we'll talk about some of the things that impact that, and then next we'll talk about troublesome terms and concepts. Like I think there's a real situation where we use language that has a conventional meaning, and then we apply the same word to in a spiritual context. As a simple one, love, it's quite different. Another one, humility. Another one, servant and service. They're different in a material and spiritual context, because the spiritual environment in some ways is 180 degrees different polarization than the material one in many different ways. So oftentimes we hear those words, Prabhupada says them, he uses them, we can repeat that sentence, and we can tell it to somebody else who can learn it, and we can read it right out of the book. So it's truth, but do we understand it correctly is oftentimes a real issue. And I think these things are trouble for us. Surrender is a big one. So I really think if we understand them in the spiritual context, that this can become really helpful for us in our devotion, especially in our enthusiasm. Because we'll discuss where enthusiasm comes from, right? That enthusiasm comes from, on a real basic sense, it comes from you see something that's valuable and you feel you can attain it. Right? You can see that just in an ordinary context. Right? I tell you, there's $1 million out in the backyard. You just got to run there and get it. Well, you're enthusiastic. But if I tell you, there's something not very nice in your backyard, no enthusiasm. And if I tell you there's something valuable that you can't attain, again, no enthusiasm. So the two things, when you see something that's really valuable and desirable, such as, Krishna prema, and you feel that you can attain it, then there's enthusiasm. When we think maybe it's not so nice, or we think we can't get there, then, well, it would be nice, but I can't get there. Or it would, it's not so great, so who cares? So that's so a lot of these things will affect that, how we understand. A lot of it's going to come down to our understanding of ourselves, Krishna, and our relationship, Sambandha. We'll talk about that. And then neither too attached nor too averse. This comes from the 11th canto, the discussion of Krishna and Uddhava. And Krishna says that somebody who's very attached to this material world, like they think this is all there is, right? They're qualified for karma. They do pious activities because they don't see anything else besides this world. And so the problem when you think like that is oftentimes you will do impious activities and suffer negative reactions. So Krishna gives the path of karma that says, hey, you want to enjoy life, right? Yes. You don't want to suffer, do you? No. Says, okay, you got to control yourself a little bit. Act in the right way. You'll get rewarded, and you won't get punished, and you won't have the negative karma. Then he says somebody who's really averse to the world. Oh, it's a terrible place. It's a trap. It's horrible. They just want to get out. They're qualified for jnana. They want to withdraw from the world. They want it's a jnana vairagya, renunciation and knowledge. They want to pull out. It's a terrible place, right? I can't bear to be here. I just have to go away. And their destination is, generally is the Brahmajyoti, because they've withdrawn from everything. So it says the devotees, they're not too attached. They realize this is not eternal for me. I've had many lives, and even all those are not eternal, nor is it my eternal home. Right? I realize this is not the place where I want to remain. At the same time, I don't see it as so horrible and hideous and terrible that I can't bear it, that I can't even deal with it. Because in bhakti, we interact with the world. And so I think a lot of times we're too attached, but we really wish we were too averse. we're too averse while being too attached. The devotees we can work a miracle sometimes. We can be both too attached and too averse at the same time, which causes a strange conflict, you know. So anyway, so we'll talk about that. How do you balance those things, and how that makes a difference? Because Prabhupada talks a lot about that. The threefold miseries, the fourfold miseries, the path of birth and death, and we should want to. This is no place for a gentleman. Well, he's trying to get us to stop from being too attached. But we have a tendency to want to take it the rest of the way. Because we don't see we don't understand the opportunity given here, working in this world. As it says, the human life is the way to go back to Krishna. Right? This is even the Devas like to be born on earth. Right? For that reason, there's verses in the Bhagavatam to that along those lines. And then unequal vision. Right? We have a doctrine called Samadarshana, equal vision, where we understand everybody is a soul, and so every living being is equal on the soul level. There are this gorgeous, wonderful spark of Krishna. Krishna says, right, that they're my anshas, my part, my portion. So in that case, a little portion. Krishna is so wonderful. A little portion of Krishna is also awfully wonderful, also, and valued by Krishna. Right, and so there's intrinsic value in every soul. Then, of course, we have different bodies and different abilities. Right. So Prabhupada criticized Gandhi, who said that that people, everybody is Harijan, child of God. True, but he was saying that anybody could be a Brahmin and worship deities in the temple and things like that. So there's a balance. So we will recognize the fact that we have different bodies and different abilities. Like say when surgery started to happen in the Middle Ages, a lot of times barbers did it because they were good with razors. Now these days, you wouldn't call a surgeon for a haircut, and you wouldn't call a barber for surgery, right? Even though they're equal, they're souls, right? But one can do one thing and one can do the other. And so we have quite a hierarchical society that comes around. And so we hope that those who are in certain positions, are qualified, But if we only look at the external, then we'll fall into material types of consciousness where we think that somebody who has certain abilities and then has a higher position, a little bit more advanced in devotional service, is better intrinsically than other people. When really the difference is somebody who's a devotee should understand that if they have attained something in devotional service, it's because Krishna has blessed them. It's because others have helped them. It's because they've received it. It's a gift. Bhakti is a gift. And so therefore they would feel happy to help others, not to be, ruling over others and treating them as though they're lesser. Prabhupada, when he came, nobody had any idea of anything. He was washing clothes sometimes for the people in 26 2nd Avenue because they weren't very clean. He was cooking for them. He was waiting in line for his shower in his in his apartment, because he cared for them. He was there. He did all this because he cared for people. He didn't see them as, nonsense, nobodies, and I'm an exalted devotee. He didn't see that way. He saw it from a Vaishnava way. And so I don't think in many ways we've managed that balance very well. And so we're not always so kind, frankly, to one another. So we'll talk about that. The next one, I stole a little bit of this from Prabhupada. There was a letter that Prabhupada wrote to one of his students, and he who was discouraged in his devotional service. And Prabhupada said that when he was trying to start this movement, he only got suppression and repression and depression from, he said, from his god brothers, is what he said at that time. And so I said, so this one I have suppressed, repressed, compressed, and depressed. And that one is, we have a tendency to think, and this comes from our notion of surrender and some other types of notions of authority, that devotional service is meant to like kind of mold us into this uniform, squeeze everything out of us and squeeze us down into a little nothing, and then shape us into this little devotee. We suppress things, are compressed, suppressed, repressed, and then we become depressed. And we'll talk about that, how that works. What actually that and the next one is kind of the opposite of that. There's a famous letter that Prabhupada wrote to Kurandar, who was a leader in Los Angeles, and we'll talk a little bit more about other things in that letter. But I may have gotten the order wrong here, but in that letter, he says that Prabhupada says devotional service is individual, spontaneous, and voluntary. It may have been voluntary and spontaneous. The order doesn't matter so much. But he said those three things. And if I tell you that, and when I look at my experience, in ISKCON, I never thought of it that way. It seems a lot more like it's scripted, not individual. It's scheduled and it's obligatory. And Prabhupada, and what Prabhupada said there, to give a little background, he said that the leaders, the way they should do it is they should give devotees a fresh challenge, so the devotees want to rise to the challenge, rather than kind of have the whip in a chair mentality. And then at the end, if there's something we haven't covered, or maybe we can take a look at what the culture would look like if we kind of made some of these adjustments. That's what I have planned. And so the question is, why did I think these things happened? Because we have the parampara, we're handing things down from one generation to another. So how did things become a little bit skewed? And so one thing that was happening, which was very rare, is when you have a religious tradition that's transplanted from one culture to another. And so certain kind of just things that are just taken for granted, when it's there in its native culture, may not be picked up at all in the new one. The foundational texts are being translated into a different language. So sometimes there's, issues with that. The word, you don't have a corresponding word for that. Or, the Sanskrit can be a lot more rich. So some of that can happen. You'll see, like in the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada uses the same word for quite a few different things, because there just isn't a word for that, So especially towards the end, when he's describing different static states and things. And then, like I mentioned before, words with an established conventional meaning are sometimes used in spiritual ways, and so we don't make that transition. And then probably there's one more thing too that I didn't put here, was that at that time, and especially in the formative years, people were coming from outside, joining the temple, and kind of going from 0 to 100, very, very quickly. One of the things that Prabhupada said in the Kurandar letter is that not to encourage people to move into the temple so quickly. Let them get a little bit of a foundation. But people were following the Harinam back to the temple and moving in, and because that's all there was for a long time. There was only the temples. So if you wanted to be a devotee, you joined the temple, and immediately you do everything different in your life. You can start doing the full program, intensive service, eating differently, sleeping differently, doing everything differently, and I think that that causes some difficulties that way. We didn't understand, that you can't successfully go from 0 to 100 very often. There are things that are going to come up. We didn't deal effectively with the natural, anarthas that were going to be there. And so we didn't learn how to do that. And then maybe most important of all was that, the society grew very quickly, and Prabhupada was the only experienced at all, and definitely the only advanced devotee. Rinpoche Prabhu, my guru, says, he was the only adult as well. And then it grew very quickly. And so, he was giving the books, he was, doing, and lectures and so many things, but, he was, writing letters, but he couldn't deal, personally with very many people. And so you had very young devotees who were the leaders and the local leaders, and somebody who was joined a couple of weeks earlier was senior, or a few months earlier, this kind of stuff. And so people were put into positions of responsibility without sufficient training, and without a lot of serious association. And so that, I think, really, those things really contributed to some of these things, entering into the culture. And then because we're parampara, right? We pass it on, even with the misunderstandings. So anyway, and this situation of kind of becoming stagnated, the last thing I'll say isn't something new. Right, even in early times, there people had this experience of having really coming into the temple and having things just really change, and you feel all this enthusiasm, and Krishna is there, man, everything's happening, and then it kind of, and you hit a little bit of a downward thing. And they used to either the honeymoon period, or they say it was the time of special mercy, where Krishna would zap you with kind of love bomb you, and then he'd withdraw it and say, okay, now you're hooked, but now you got to do it. I take the mercy away. I think really what's happening there is, we already talked about it before, that what happens at first when you contact devotional service, everything is new, it's wonderful, and it's clear to you it's a gift, and so you're more humble, and so Krishna, the holy name itself is special mercy. There's no more special mercy than the holy name. And so it works because you're not making offenses, because you think the devotees are great. You think this is wonderful. The holy name is wonderful. Everything is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. And so, so the holy name reciprocates with you. And then that first thing that we talked about up there, right? It's a hamai, you start to think that, yeah, I'm really happening now. Pride, boom, comes right in there. You start to make offenses. You start to not be so attentive because, hey, you're doing it now. And then it shrinks. So I think that's really what happens there. And then we kind of have been still trying to work ourselves through that for so long. And so since this is something that's been kind of, systematic, and it's been here so long, it made me think that there's something in the culture, that contributes to it. And so that's kind of the thesis I've got for you, and that's how I'm going to approach it, and we'll see how it goes. And so I guess by now, I guess you can see whether this might be appealing to you or not by what we've done here. We've got, there's a little bit of time left. If there's any questions, I see there was in the chat. So Chindra says, how do we know if it's tasteful? We'll talk about that. Of course, what we know, the things that are tasteful to Krishna, that we know, all right? That comes from the, that we can reliably take from the acharyas. We know what Krishna, the kind of things Krishna likes. But then our mood, the more devotional the mood is, the more we have a positive view of Krishna, the more we feel gratitude, the more we are enthusiastic to do something for him. Then that's what Krishna finds tasteful. That's the real taste.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. Do we have next week I'm attending the concert from Janavi Harrison.
Yeah,
Uh,
I will send recordings.
okay.
I'm recording this right now,
Mm-hmm.
and every session I'll send it to everybody who registered. I'll email it to
Okay.
you and
Thank you
links
so
to it.
much.
So yeah, so if you miss it, you won't miss. You can watch it.
Yeah. Another question is you have listed the list of things, and also it mentioned the power of chanting mantra. You cannot question the power of chanting mantra, but it appears to be, it is, I don't know how to frame it. It is not effective because you're doing the list of things you mentioned,
Yeah,
you do the
it
sinful
reduces the
things, you do
effectiveness.
all those stuff.
Yeah, it
Okay, you
reduces the
mentioned it.
effectiveness. Yeah.
Yeah. But my question is, we are human beings and we are not the saints. I'm talking about myself.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the saint, I'm a human being.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, I have a lot of flaws and negatives, but at the same time I have a lot of devotion, and I know that that's why I started this journey, but not to the through the Krishna, but I have my like spiritual journey in several different ways. But my question is, by chanting Hare Rama Hare Krishna, all the things that are listed, the sinful the things, do they eventually reduce, or instead of ineffective, does it help us to move forward?
Well, see what's going to happen if we try to reduce those things that make it ineffective, right? Because the effect of those things has a certain time limit, and so if we're making offenses, if we're reducing the number of offenses, then the holy name is going to work on all the dirty things. Okay, so what happens is that's called the clearing stage, when we're making fewer and fewer offenses. We're being mindful of those things and trying our best to reduce those things. And so as we reduce it, the name has more and more effect and removes all the dirty things.
Yeah, especially the
Yeah,
attachment to ourself,
yeah,
nothing to do with anything, attachment to ourself, attachment to the little things in the
yeah,
life.
yeah. Because
Even if you're aware of, you have to renounce from it. It's sometimes it seems to be it is impossible, and I think that is the reason you go and surrender to God. Please help me, because I'm not able to get away from this attachment. I'm not able to do this, and I'm not able to get away this thing. But please help me. That's why we chant and we do everything.
and
My
see,
question is,
yeah,
by chanting and with with passion. It's not that not being attentive. Most of the time with passion. If you do that with our ability, do you think our bad qualities will diminish and
yes,
we will progress in the
yes,
spiritual path?
yes. See, Krishna is attractive, and so we will become more attracted to Krishna. So it's not so much even as much as like giving up as it's matter that you see something better. And so Krishna becomes attractive, and the things that we thought were so valuable, things that we
Hmm.
thought that we couldn't, that mattered so much that we couldn't even think of getting rid of, will suddenly be like, oh, that's not so important anymore.
Yeah.
So yeah, it works. Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Thank
Yeah,
you
yeah.
very
Have
much.
confidence. Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm. Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Giri Govardhan Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Sachin Prabhu.
Excellent introduction. It's really enthused me to attend the next 7 sessions. So I'm very happy to have your introduction was spot on and exactly in how I want to see my journey progress and some of the doubts. One question I had was, is this, when you talk about stagnation happening, is this stagnation enthusiasm and alternating stagnation enthusiasm normal in the progression of a devotee, or is it
Yes.
an immature stage?
Oh, it's typical of this initiative sadhana bhakti. It's gana tarala. It's just how it is. But what we're trying to, of course, as it gets steadier and steadier, the enthusiasm is more continuous and more, and the downs are less. It's like if the stock market, right, goes up and down, but if it can go up and down, but it can overall go up, and so that's kind of what we do, and that's the idea that we'll be able to sustain it better.
And does that apply only in the temple? Like, for example, in the temple, I can be enthusiastic and great. Outside of the temple, dealing with family, dealing with material situations, I tend to have negative qualities come back. Is that
I
a
believe it's
default
possible.
in my
I believe
devotion?
it's possible for you to overcome that. Yeah, it's possible for you to. It's possible. Yeah.
Okay.
It
Thank
doesn't
you.
have to be. It doesn't have to be a forever situation at all.
And also another question is, like, how can we be always in thoughts of Krishna? How can we do that?
Well, it's interesting. It says Rupa Goswami says that we're supposed to work towards, like you said, always remembering Krishna.
Yeah.
And he says, and
How can
never
we?
forget him. And that sounds redundant because he understands that we will forget him, and then we have to remember him again. And then, and then we may forget him again. So when we've forgotten him, we have to remember, and we try not to forget, but when we forget, we remember him again. So it's something you just continue to do. When you realize you've forgotten him, remember him. Try not to forget, but when you do, remember him again.
No, for example, when you are doing
Yeah,
when you're doing
yeah,
your activities, when you're
yeah,
doing work,
yeah.
even though you want to be, but
Yeah.
how can you keep?
Well,
How can you attain that?
yeah. So you first of all you remember him regularly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
There's the word nitya that means always, but it also means regularly. So first of
Mm-hmm.
all, you start out doing it regularly,
Yes.
and
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes more continuous. So we can't just jump usually right to remembering all the time, but you start regularly. And so if you do it kind of regularly, then you can make it a little more regular and a little more regular. So
Mm-hmm.
everything is incremental,
Okay.
but it'll work if you do it.
Okay. Thank you.
Dandavats.
Vidagda Prabhu, Hare Krishna.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I'm like Sachinda Prabhu. Yeah, I'm really excited to go through this list you just showed us. And there's such a thing as a proper conception, a proper understanding of things. And a lot of times we assume we know more than we do, like that verse you cited in Madhuri Domini at the beginning. The young Sanskrit students thinking he's expert already, but that's part of the problem, and there's the pride again. But yeah, I'm looking forward to this. I got something from this already that makes it worth, and I'm excited for coming back. I'm looking forward to the recording. I'll probably go through some of this again. Let me just read something here that just a short paragraph.
Okay, yeah.
Something that Prabhupada wrote in 1956.
Oh, great.
And it was when he was starting the League of Devotees, and it was kind of like his mission statement.
Ooh,
so it goes, okay, this is Prabhupada. To evoke the qualities of goodness, particularly Sattva Gun, in every member of the League, individually, by the process of spiritual initiation, Diksha, by establishing him in the status of a qualified Brahmin, a good and intellectual man, on the basis of truthfulness, forgiveness, equality, tolerance, education, purity, knowledge, specific and general, and faith in the transcendental service of Godhead. I guess you could add the holy name to that. But so Prabhupada, in those days, he was looking for a few good men. He wanted to actually train up Brahmins, but he that carried over when he came to the West, to New York. But Krishna had another idea, and he ended up with thousands of us off the street, and he wasn't ready for so many women either. But Krishna sent them, so he said, "What can I do?"
That's right.
You know,
He tried. He did his best to handle it. Yeah, he did what he could.
So he did. Yeah, he just the whole thing just started to unfold, develop, and Prabhupada did his best to, steer the ship.
I mean,
Which
he was the one that
unwieldy.
He was the one that made it the International Society for Krishna Consciousness when it was only that one little thing. So maybe he's a little bit to blame. Krishna says, "Oh, you have a big vision. I'll help you."
He always thought big. He always thought
he did. That was always his thing. So.
Yeah, he was right. He was going to save the world. That was part.
So Krishna helped him out with that. So okay, we got some people for you.
But it's so nice to hear these things and to apply them.
Yeah, it's the proper conception. I like that. That was a good way to put it. Find the proper conceptions.
Yeah, because I think, like you were saying at one point, that we're not kind to each other. We're not doing some basic things that we should be doing, and it's because we're not on that, Samadarshana. We're not seeing everybody equally. We're not working for the benefit of everyone. We're not, that's Brahma Bhuta.
Yeah.
Where somebody's only wants to use happiness and that is in the happiness of others, so anyway.
All right. Well, appreciate everybody showing up today, and we'll see what we can do here in the coming weeks. I when I have these series of classes, I usually try to take something that I've been thinking about, and it forces me then to put it down on paper. So I haven't fully produced all the other episodes yet. So pray for me that I deliver on my promise here.
Yeah, I don't have any worries about that. I know you're going to deliver.
So I'm getting some confirmation it's a good idea. So let's see if it can come to fruition. Well, thank you all, and we'll be back. And I'm sending to do your email addresses. I'll send links to the recordings every week. I just do that, so that you don't have to worry.
Great.
So if you can't make it, you can't make it. It's not a problem. I know they put we have to attend so many classes. Well, I'm happy to bend the rules.
But I'm also interested in the interaction, to be able to say something with you.
Yeah, no, that's fine. We'll be here online every time, so everybody is welcome to join. But if you can't, no problem. I'm not taking attendance.
Okay.
Well, so Chindra, I'm hoping to be able to fill up these, so we'll see. I think I promised a lot already. Hope I can come through. I've been thinking about this stuff, so I kind of know where I'm going, but we'll see. All right. Hare Krishna, everyone.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Prabhuji.